right? So in our previous class, we have started implementation of framework. So as part of that, we have seen how to create Maven project, and then we have updated Formula.xml, and also we created folder structure. And these are the prerequisite. And then we have created root start Java, which contains only the URLs. And then we created user endpoints, so which contains all CRUD methods implementation. And the next step, we have started implementation of the test cases. Now we are in the step 6 now. So in the step 6, we have to create our test cases. So let's see how we can create the test cases. Create test cases. So if I just go to the Eclipse and open this under api.test, we have UserTest.java. So here we are starting creating the test cases. So as part of the test cases, first we have created one method called setup data. So this particular method will generate the data using Pojo, and the same data we are posting it here. And after that, we will try to implement another test methods and test post user. After that, we will see how to get the data from the user. So for that, we'll create one more method. I'll say public void test user, test get user by name. Get user by name. So here, whatever the user we posted here, so the same user details, so we want to get from the get request. So for that, we create one more test, set get user by name. And this is also test method. So we say test annotation and say priority equal to 2. So here, what is a parameter which you have to pass? Get user by name means we have to pass username as a parameter. So we already created some data here, right? So the same username it will use, because whatever the data we created using Pojo class, we are sending the same data. And whenever you want to get the data by username, so again, we will pass the same username, whatever it is generated here, the same username we are going to pass. Okay. So for that, we have to access user endpoints, user endpoints dot. So we have a method called read user, which is created as part of user endpoints, read user. And here, what is the thing we have to pass? We have to pass username as a parameter. So from where we will get this username? Again, that we need to get from the payload. So here we are setting the data in the payload, and we are sending the data by using payload. The whole data we are passing here. But here from the payload, we have to extract only the username. So how to extract the payload here? So whatever payload we created, so from this payload, how we can refer the payload? By using this keyword. So this dot payload, user payload dot, we have a getter method, right? So get username. So this will give you the username of your payload. So this will return the response. So we are calling this method read user by passing the username, and from the user endpoints, this will call this method read user, get the username here, and we'll pass it as part of path parameter, and then send the response. So once you get a response, and you can apply some validations here. So I'm not writing all validations. You can just enhance the code later, and the basic things I'm writing here. So we have to store this response in a variable. I say a response equal to, and the type of the parameter is what? Response. So once you get a response, then we can add some validations. Response dot, we can use then keyword here. Response dot then dot log dot all. We can log all the stuff. Log dot all. And similarly, I can say response dot status code. We can verify status code should be 200. I can verify response dot status code. This we can put in the assertion. Assert dot assert equals response dot status code, comma 200. Okay, so like this, we can add more number of validation points, and we can also add JSON path, data validation, schema validation. So all those things we can still add in the same test. Okay, so now this is a test get user by name. And similarly, let us try to update. Okay, first let us try to execute these two test cases. Test post user and test get user by name. Let us save the file and then try to execute. So get status code and status code, there is no different, both are same. Okay, so here response dot, sorry. So here when I using in assertion, we have to use get status code. Okay, so then only it will get the status code. But without using assertion, right? So if you want to directly verify the status code, then you can say response dot status code of 200. So that's another way we can do the validation. For example, let's say response dot status code should be 200. So this is how we can also do it. This is a one. So status code 200. So this will also give the same thing actually. So status code also will be the same thing, response dot status code. But when I use in assertion, we normally use get status code because that will get the status code from the response. Okay, so this is get user by name. So let us try to execute these two tests for now. Right click, run as test ng test. See, JSON object, JSON XML, not always reusable methods, okay? Because the response will be different from one request to another request. So you cannot use same kind of JSON object, same kind of XML object. So it will different from one request to another type of request. So when I creating reusable component, we have to make sure that should be same for all kinds of requests. So then only we have to make that as a reusable component. Otherwise, we should not make it whatever we think, we should not make everything as a reusable. Okay. So there should be some common thing between all the requests. So then only we will able to make a reusable. So if you feel which is a common, so definitely you can make it as a reusable. But especially JSON object or JSON XML, so these cannot be reusable because the response will be different from one request to another type of request. Okay, so now we have executed. So you can see here ID is randomly generated. So this is ID which is random. Actually, this API is not generating ID, right? But in the payload, we are generating the ID. If I just go back our test cases, see here on the payload, we are generating that. Actually, API is not generating the ID number. So we are generating the ID number. So the same ID number is got displayed here. And this is the random data which we generated. Initially, we have seen ID equal to 0, right? So this is generated by our payload, but actually the API is not generating ID. So whatever data we are providing, the same data which is creating in their database. Okay. So now two requests are got executed. Similarly, we can also write update username and then delete username. So let's create how to update the existing user. So the next test method I'm going to write public void test update user by name. And this is also test, and I say priority equal to 3. Okay, so update user by name. So almost it is equal to creating of the user, but only the data will be changed. So what I can do is whatever post request we have created here, the same thing we will copy post user. Right. So here to update by username, what we need to do, first of all, before sending this request, we have to change the data. So whatever the data we created in the payload, the same username we use, but apart from the username, we will try to update rest of the details. Like you can update first name, last name, or email address, whatever the details you want to update for the same username, you can update. So what I'll do is here, I will update some data by using same payload. Okay. So here I'll say update data using payload. So we already created some data by using payload in the setup data. So what I will do is I will try to change some data, like say first name, last name, and email address I want to change. So copy the same statements. Whichever data you want to just update, you can copy the same statements and keep it here. Right. So here what happens again, it will again regenerated first name, last name, and email address. When I call the same statements, when I use same statements here, which will regenerate the first name, last name, and with the same data will be set into the first name, last name, and email, but username and other details will not be changed. So this is the updated data actually. Okay. So now once you updated the data, we will send the same data. Here we are going to update the user. So to update the user, which is the method we have to call from endpoints, update user. And update user is also required two parameters. If I go to the user endpoints, update user require two parameters. One is username we have to pass. Second one is what? Payload we have to pass. Username and payload, two parameters we have to pass. So come back to user test, and here update user. The first parameter is what? Username. So how to get the username from the payload? This dot payload, user payload dot get username. Because we are not generating username again. Same username we are using, whichever is created in the first test. And this is the first parameter. And second parameter, we need to pass the payload, updated payload. Updated payload means we have updated first name, last name, and email address, and rest of the details are same. So we have to pass user payload. So user payload. Okay, so user payload. So user endpoints dot update user, this dot user payload dot get username. So we are passing username as parameter, and then we are passing the payload. So here we are just updating only first name, last name, and email address. Rest of the details we are not updating. And the API is not generating ID automatically. So we have created our own ID here in the user payload. We have created our own user ID. So which will not creating any user ID. And we are not updating user ID here. So because rest of the details we have updated. If you want update ID also, you can still update. Rest of the detail other than this username, rest of the details you can update. So I have updated three details here: first name, last name, and email address. And then I'm passing payload dot get username. This will pass existing username along with the updated payload. So we are updated these details here, right? So we are passing here, and same ID, it will automatically update. Same ID. So I don't think about ID. Username is the main point here, not ID. Okay, so ID will be different. So we are not considering the ID, we are considering the username. So username based, we are doing the operations here. So that's the reason we are not updating username here. Other than username, you can update any data. So even ID also you can update, no problem. So this is a username and payload we are passing, and then we are sending all the logs and assertion is. And this is a not update user, right? So update user request. And here we are validating the response. So here I can say response dot then dot log dot body. So you can also validate the response in multiple ways, guys. So I'll show you one more way of validation. Instead of putting this assertion, you can also do like this. For example, response dot then dot log dot inside this dot body, inside this body dot status code 200. So this is also assertion actually. You can, if you want to verify status code, you can directly write a assertion like this, or by using assertion also you can directly write this response dot get status code comma 200. So this is basic difference between this one and this one. And this is basically a chai assertion, which is comes along with the rest assured, right? So, but this is a test ng assertion. So both are exactly the same validation. Here also we are doing the status code validation, and here also we are doing the same status code validation. So you can use either this one or you can use this one. Okay, fine. So here and semicolon, I put semicolon so that I want to just print the body of the response. This is update user by name. And once you updated, we will verify whether data is updated or not. Here we just verifying the only status code, but we need to also check the data is updated or not. So in the same request, I'm going to check the data also. Checking data after update. So how to check the data after updation? Just we need to retrieve the data, right? We retrieve the data and check. So for that, again, we will send the get user by name request. So this is the thing we have to again send. So copy this and keep it here. Because once you updated, again, we are sending the get request here, read user request by passing the same username, right? So this is the response after update. So here I'm creating one variable response after update. Response after update. So in the response, again, we are expecting the status code should be 200. So response.get status code is 200. So this is just verification, and you can also add more validation points on the response body. You can verify the first name, last name, email address is updated or not. You can cross check. So this is how we can write another test for updating user by name. And the last test, deleting the user. Now one more method I'm creating, void public void. I'll take the questions later. So first let me finish this concept. Public void test delete user by name. So again, deletion is also happening by using name, So you can say name, and at the rate, this is also test method, test, say priority equal to 4. Delete user by name. And yeah, so now here, how we can delete the user by name. So again, from the user endpoints, we have to call delete user method. So user endpoints dot delete user. So this delete user method we already created in the user endpoints. We are just calling that method. And what is the parameter it will take? Delete user. You only username, and that to current username. So how we can access current username? This dot payload, user payload dot get username. So this will pass the username into the request delete user, and this will return the response for us. So I can create one more variable called response, and the type of the variable is response. Okay. And once it is deleted, we can again verify the after deletion, we don't get any body. So simply we can verify the status code. So response dot, and how we can verify it by adding one more assertion. So we can say asset dot asset equals, and same thing, same assertion, we can add it here. Okay, so this is a how we can verify the delete request. So with this, we have done all the requests, post user, and then update user by name, update user by get user by name, update user by name, and then delete user by name. Okay, so these are the 4 different test methods which we have created. Now we need to run this code. Yeah, sorry. So here this should be response after update. Okay. Right. So this is how we can write our test cases. Let me just recap once again. And before execution. Okay. So guys, let me repeat once again. So first of all, we need to set up the data by using POJO. before sending the post user. So by using this faker, we created a data and which includes ID, username, first name, last name, everything. So these APIs is not automatically generating ID. So we are generating our own ID by using this faker library. Everything we are going to generate. So API is not generating anything randomly. So we have to generate our own thing, including ID also, including ID, username, everything. So by using POJO, we created the data. In the post user, we are calling create user method from the user endpoints by passing the payload. And then we are printing all the log here, response, and then we added assertion. And we have added only status code here. You can add more number of other validations, JSON response, JSON data validation. So whatever it is there. But before that, please check all the requests in the Postman tool. And based on that, we can add more number of validation points. Because if you want to validate the response, you need to exactly know what kind of response you are getting. So check it in the Postman tool first, do some manual testing, and then add all validations here. And get user by name. This is another test method. Here we are passing the payload dot get username. So we already created payload, user payload. So I'm referring this current payload. So by using this keyword, this dot payload, from the payload, we already assigned the username in the first request itself. Username we already created here. So the same username, by using same username, I'm extracting the data from the user. So I'm passing the same username here and getting the response, printing all the logs, and then verifying the status code. This is get user by name. And update user by name. So how to update your user by name is we have to first update the data. Like first name, last name, email address, I'm updating. Update in the sense I'm regenerating the values, because I'm calling the same method. So whatever I have done in the first method, same thing I'm doing, so that it will generate the new data randomly. So here we are updating the data. So first name, last name, email address I'm generated, new first name, new last name, new email address I'm updating. So created 3 different values. And then we are calling update user by passing username and along with the payload. So updated payload, both the values we have to pass. And then I'm printing the response and then added the assertion. So after updation, we need to also check the data is correct or not. So I am extracting the data by using same username into this variable. And then I'm just verifying the status code. Then you can also verify the response body also. Okay, this is a validation we have added. Now delete user by name. So here we are calling the delete user method from the user endpoints by passing the username and getting the response. And then we are validating the again status code in the response. So these are the test methods, and very high level I have created, but you need to add more number of validations in every test method. Okay, so this is the basic stuff. So let me run one more time. All 4 tests are created and see the results. Let me just try to run as test-ng test. Okay, so now all 4 requests are successfully created and they have passed. So this is how we can normally automate the request. So now the next level, so we have created all the test cases. Now step 7, we will continue today. So suppose these are all normal test cases, like we have created just one user, and then we have read the data from one user, and then we have get the user, and then we have updated, and then we have deleted. Suppose I want to perform data-driven test, right? So data-driven test is nothing but what? We can create multiple users with multiple sets of data. So whether the user is able to create with multiple sets of data or not, we can check. This is a data-driven test. So let me show you one example here, how we can perform the data-driven test. Create data-driven test. So to create data-driven test, what are the prerequisites? First, we need to have data in the Excel sheet. Okay, so we need to maintain the data, your user data. So we are not going to take the data from the POJO now. So we are going to take the data from the Excel sheet, like ID, username, first name, last name. So these are the details we are getting from the Excel sheet. We have to prepare some data, right? So the Excel sheet data is required. That's the first thing. And second thing is we need to use Apache POI. So there's a third-party API which we require to work with the Excel sheet. And we don't need to write the entire code. We have to use utility file. So we need Excel utility file. So we need one Excel utility file. So if you don't know about this utility, I will share that utility file. Directly you can copy and paste and use it in your test. So Excel sheet data which we need, which contains some data, and Excel utility file we required. And we will create a data-driven test case. So we will create another test case. Data-driven test case, we will have a separate test case. We should not include them in the normal test. So these are the normal user tests. We will create a data-driven test case as a separate test. Okay. So let's see how we can perform the data-driven test case. So as a prerequisite, first we need to have a Excel sheet which contains some data. And where we have to keep that Excel sheet, we already created. If we have created some new folder, test data, we can keep that Excel sheet there. Or else we can directly keep that Excel sheet inside the project directly. So inside the project, I will specify the file, or else you can create one more new folder, and I'll name it as test data. So inside this test data, we can have the file. So let me have the file here. I already created some data. So let me copy it here. Okay, let me open the file. Okay, so you can just look at this. So I have created some users, user ID, username, first name, last name, email, password, and then phone number. So some dummy data which we created. So we need to prepare more number of details like this. Some random data you can generate and you can add. So now I'm going to create multiple users by using this data. Okay. Right. So let's see how we can do this. And I already created this Excel sheet and keep here. And the next step is what we need to use the same request. We are not going to change anything in the endpoint. So endpoints also same. We are not going to change anything. So now we are going to add a new data-driven test case. And before that, we need to add one utility file, right? So we need Excel utility also. And before that, please cross-check in the pom.xml. We need to add the dependencies. So Apache POI, these are the two dependencies which we need to add in the pom.xml. And then only we will be able to use this library. Okay. And then, so let's see how we can create a utility file. So I already have the utility file. Let me just go through that. And where we need to keep the utility file inside the utilities. Okay. So here SRC test resources is there, right? So not here, utilities, where we created API.utility. So here we need to have this file Excel utility.java. So this is the utility file actually. So if I just look at this, and these are the different classes, we will get it from the Apache POI. From the library, we will get these classes like file input. So file input stream, output stream comes from Java itself, and rest of the all classes are coming from Apache POI. And this is a constructor which we created, because as soon as you created an object for this class, we have to send the path of your Excel wherever it is located. And here, this is a method, and these are all reusable methods, because if you have more number of data-driven test cases, all data-driven test cases will use the same methods. Get row count. So when you call this method by passing the sheet name, this will return the row count, how many number of rows we have in the Excel sheet. And get cell count. So when you pass sheet name and row number, then it will count the number of cells are there in that particular row, and then it will return that. This is a get cell count. Now get cell data. So when you pass sheet name, row number, and cell number or column number, that will return the data. So this is the most important method which we are going to use very frequently. Get cell data. Now set cell data. So this particular method will return sheet name. When you pass sheet name, row number, column number, and data, this will go and write the data into the same Excel sheet. But in the data-driven testing, we don't use these methods, but because this is a common utility file, we will use for even web automation also. And there we use these methods, but here API testing point of view, we don't use this. Only the few methods are enough: get row count, cell count, and cell data. So these are enough. And you don't need to remember all these things, guys. You can just copy paste in your project. So 90% of the people will use existing code. Okay, they can get the code from the Google or somewhere or some other projects, and they will reuse the same thing in our current projects. And you don't need to remember all those things, but you have to know how to working with the Excel utility. That's the most important. And the same Excel utility class you will use even in the web automation also. Even in, if you are using Selenium, you people will know about this. Even Selenium is also, we are going to refer the same utility. That's what I'm saying. This is a reusable component. So you can refer the same file in all your projects, even if you are REST assured API testing projects or web automation projects. You can use the same kind of utility, okay, without changing anything. So you don't need to remember all these things. Just if you have to know how to use this file for our data-driven test. That is okay. Right. So this is our utility file, and I'll share this file also, because use the same file for your other projects. Now, so can just close this and now go back to your, now data is ready and utility file is also ready. And what else we need? We have to create something else, data provider. In TestNG, we have a concept called data provider, right? So we have to create data providers. If we have one data-driven test, one data provider is enough. But if we have multiple data-driven tests, we can create all data providers method. And these data providers, we will keep inside the utilities. Okay, so we will create multiple data providers. So this is also most important. So what is data provider will do? Data provider method will get the data from the Excel sheet. And let me tell you what exactly it is. And people who are attended the WebDriver session, Selenium session, they are already aware of this. But let me repeat what exactly it is. In the TestNG, let's say we have data in Excel sheet. Okay, so this is our data. In our Excel sheet, we have some data. And we have something called data provider. So data provider is nothing but one annotation method. And whichever method we specify as a data provider, that method is responsible for providing the data to another test method. Now, this data provider method will actually get entire data from Excel sheet and store the entire data in the two-dimensional array. This is 2D array, two-dimensional array. Now, this data provider will provide the data to the test case, or we can say test method. Now, this particular test method will repeat multiple times based upon the data which is provided by the data provider. So here we are using combination of Excel utility along with the data provider. Okay, so this data provider, the first job is data provider is what? It will get the entire data from the Excel sheet and put the data in the two-dimensional array. And now the data provider will pass this entire data into the test method. Now the test method will repeat n number of times without writing any loops. So that's the main advantage of data provider. So without using any looping statement. So normally if you want to repeat something multiple times, we prefer to use looping statements in programming. So here the same method we can repeat multiple times with the different sets of data, and which is provided by data provider. So this is the concept. So this is the complete end-to-end data driven testing. So we will maintain the data in the Excel sheet. Data provider will get the data and put the data in the two-dimensional array. And then data will be passed into the test method. A test method will repeat multiple times based upon the number of data inputs which are provided by the data provider. So now Excel sheet is ready. And to read the data from Excel sheet and everything, we already have one utility file, Excel utility file. We already copied this. And what is the next thing? We have to prepare the data provider methods. And then we will able to write the separate test case for that. So now let us try to see how to create the data providers in TestNG. So this is a very important concept in TestNG. So let's create data providers. So where we have to create data providers. So these data providers are again reusable components. So that should be again part of utilities. Under utilities, we have to create data providers. Okay. So now I already have this data provider file. I'll just go through this. So this is the data providers.java. So all data provider methods I will keep inside this class. So if I just look at here, this is my data provider class. And two data provider methods I have created here. The first data provider is what? Get all the data from the Excel sheet. And the second data provider is what? Get only usernames. Okay, get only usernames from the Excel sheet. So two data providers I created. Now look at the first data provider. So this particular method we define with the data provider annotation. So whenever I say data provider annotation, this particular method is responsible for generating the data and passing the data to the another test methods in the project. So get all data. So this is the method, and what we are doing it here is we are getting the data file here in the path. So where we put the data under test data folder. So here I need to change test data // So inside the folder, we kept this file user data.excel. This is the location. And this file, this path is present inside our project. So how to get the current project location directly is by using system.getProperty. By using system.getProperty of user.dir, this will give you the current project location. In the current project, again, we need to navigate to test data. Inside this, we have a user data. So we are getting the path of your Excel. And now here we are using Excel utility class. For that, I'm creating one object and I'm passing the path as part of the constructor. So now by using this object, I'm getting the row because before reading the data from Excel, we have to find out how many number of rows are there, how many number of columns are there, we have to find out. So by using these two methods, by calling these two methods from the utility class, I'm finding total number of rows and columns, get row count, get cell count. And in the get row count, we have to pass sheet name. And in the get cell count, we have to pass sheet name along with the row number. I'm just passing one, any row number you can pass that will count the total number of cells in that particular row. So we got row number and column number. Now, so how many number of rows we have or columns we have in the Excel sheet? And the array is also having the same number of rows and same number of columns because we want to store the entire data from Excel sheet into two-dimensional array. So the size of an Excel and the size of two-dimensional array should be exactly the same. Row number, so number of columns and number of rows. So here what we are doing, we are creating one string two-dimensional array, call it as API data. And here we are passing this row number, column number here, because this will create a two-dimensional array with the same size of our Excel sheet rows and columns. So now Excel sheet rows and columns, our two-dimensional array rows and columns are exactly the same. Now this particular loop logic will get the data from the sheet and assign that same data into the two-dimensional array. So once this loop is completed, finally, this two-dimensional array contains the data, which is from Excel sheet. So whatever, so many number of columns or rows, you can have a number of columns and a number of rows in Excel sheet. So all the data will be stored in the two-dimensional array, which is API data. And many people will have some confusion here. Let me just clarify this. So what is two-dimensional array? Two-dimensional is nothing but what? So this is a two-dimensional array. We have rows and columns. This is the rows, these are the rows, and these are the columns. Two dimension. This is one dimension, second dimension, two-dimensional array. This is a 2D array, right? And in Excel sheet, we may have n number of columns, right? If you have 10 columns or if you have 20 columns, can we still store this data in the two-dimensional array or not? Can we store same, suppose, let's say in my Excel, I have two columns. I have multiple rows, 0, 1, and 2, and 0, 1. And same data I can store in the two-dimensional array. So this is my two-dimensional array. Perfectly fine. But suppose if your columns are increased in my Excel sheet, still two-dimensional array is enough to store the data or not? Please respond. So two-dimensional array is enough to store the entire columns or not? Yes. Okay, because how many number of columns are there? It is automatically create so many number of columns in two-dimensional, but still this is one dimension, this is another dimension. So two-dimensional array is enough to store n number of rows and n number of columns. Okay, because we are already counting rows and columns. Accordingly, we are creating it. Two-dimensional array we are creating based on the number of rows and columns which are coming from Excel sheet. But in Excel sheet, the count will start from 1, but in two-dimensional array, count will start from 0. Index start from 0 according to the Java. So that's the reason we are starting reading the data from first row here, not from 0. But the columns, we are starting from 0 only. Okay, again, that is a part of your logic. So once you completed this loop, the entire data is available in the two-dimensional array. And finally, what we are doing, we are just returning the two-dimensional array. And when you're returning two-dimensional array, what is the return type here? Return type is also two-dimensional array. And what is the type of data which we have in the two-dimensional array? String type. So string of 2 brackets we have to keep. So this particular data provider method will return the data, all data from Excel sheet, all the rows and all the columns. This is one data provider. Now we have another data provider method, and this will return only usernames, Okay, because we need only single dimensional array, because we don't have all the columns, we have only a single username, right? So that's only one column. So instead of creating two-dimensional, we can create a single dimensional array. So this time I'm getting only number of rows because I don't need to read all other columns, only usernames I want to get. So I create only single dimensional, and I'm reading all the usernames into this particular array. And then finally, I'm returning the data. So the first data provider method is returning all the details for the user. And the second data provider method is returning only users or only usernames of the users from Excel sheet. Okay, so here also we need to update the path, test data // So this is how first we need to prepare the data provider methods which are required for our project in the separate class. And that should be again part of utilities, API.utilities. So now by using this data provider, we will see how we can create data-driven test case. So to create a data-driven test case, again, we have to go to test cases. Now let me close this. Under test, we have to create. So let's create a new class. And here, say data-driven tests. So now we will create data-driven tests. Okay. So how to create a data-driven test? So here in the data-driven test, what I will do is, I will create multiple users by sending post request multiple times. And once it is created, I will also delete all the users by passing username. Okay. So here my data-driven test is what? First of all, we have an Excel sheet, right? In Excel sheet, we have a multiple data sets, including username, first name, last name, and everything. So this entire data I will pass by using post request to the database. Okay, one by one. So if I have 5 details or 4 to 5 inputs and 5 users, I will create by sending post request. And that is one test, one data-driven test. On one method, I will do it. In another method, from the database, I'll get the user or delete the user. Okay, I'll send one more request by delete user. So this time what I will do is from the Excel sheet, I will read only usernames, and I will pass that username as an input to the delete request and then delete the user which is available in the database. So now currently we are going to create two data-driven test cases. This is one thing and this is second thing. First thing is what? We are going to create multiple users by sending post request. And here we are using first data provider method. And in the second thing, we are going to pass only usernames from the data provider. And we are going to delete the user. So this is another data provider method I'll use. So two data provider methods we created. One is for creating entire data of the users, multiple users. And the second data provider is for getting only usernames. So by using first data provider method, I will create multiple post requests to create multiple users. And by using second data provider method, I will try to delete the user from the database by passing the different usernames. So these are the two tests we are going to write by using two different data provider methods. Okay, so now, so first let us see how we can create the test here. The first method I'm going to create, and here make sure we are going to use data providers. And this data we already read inside the two-dimensional arrays in the data provider method. Again, in the data provider method, we are referring the Excel utility methods. Okay, Excel utility methods we are referring. So this is a connection. Now, so let's create a method. The first method I'm going to create post request for multiple users. Means I will create multiple post requests. So here I'm going to create one method, public void test post user. Okay, so what we will do is we are already done the post user test, right? So let's copy paste from here. Under user test, we already created post user. So to do the post user, we need a payload, right? We need a payload. And we generated this payload by using POJO class. POJO class. Same thing we will refer. But here, instead of generating the data by using faker, we are going to get the data from the data provider. Okay, that's the most important. Okay, from the data provider, we are getting the data. Okay, so let's keep these things side by side. Okay, now let's create our test method. So public void test post user. And this is a data driven test. So what is the data provider we required? And if I just go to the data providers, let me open this also. Okay, so now post user request. So which data provider we are going to refer here? We have two data providers, right? So post user, for post user, we are going to refer first data provider, get all data. We are going to create multiple post requests. So this particular method, I will define with the test annotation, and I say priority 1. And here we have to specify which data provider is giving the data to this test method. Which data provider is giving the data to this test method. So what is the name we have given to the data provider? Data, this is the name. So same name we have to refer here. So what is the name of the data provider method? Data provider is what? Data. Okay, now where exactly the data provider method is provided, available. Suppose if the data provider is also part of the same class, then this is enough. Just you can say data provider equal to data. But suppose the data provider methods are present in separate classes or different packages. So then we have to specify where exactly the data provider method is coming from. So that we need to specify. So in the test parameter, we have to say data provider class. Data provider class. So where is our data provider class is present? What is the name of the data providers class? The name we have to specify, data providers dot class. This is the class that we need to specify. And also we have to import that one. So data providers class, we are importing from the API.utilities. Okay. Suppose if this data provider is present in the same test, same class, we don't need this parameter and we don't need to import also. Okay. But because of it is present in some other class, some other package, we have to specify this parameter along with the import statement. Okay. So data provider class also we specified. So now we are going to implement this. So how to implement this post user? So we already got the data, right? This data provider will provide the data. And we have to pass parameters. We have to receive the data. So this data provider is sending the data. And we have to receive the data in multiple parameters. Like username, first name, last name, email address. Many parameters are there, right? In the data. So we have to receive those values in the parameter. So we have to create multiple parameters here. String, let's say user ID is one parameter. A string, and these parameters should be the same order in Excel sheet. In whichever order you specify the data, in the same order we have to specify the parameters here. String first name user ID, a string username, and we are taking this data from the Excel sheet, not from the Faker library. Okay, string username and string first name, let's say F name, string last name, and then string user email, right? And then what else we have? Apart from the user email, we have password and phone number, right? We have a password and phone number. String PWD password, and then phone number, string PH. Okay, so these are the parameters, because these are the parameters are passing by this data provider method. So we need to define all the parameters. Now here, by using these parameters data, we have to create a payload. Okay, by using this data, we have to create a payload. Again, we will use Pojo class. Without Pojo class, we can't. So we will create our own payload by passing this data. So do we have ID in the Excel sheet? Can you just look at here? Yeah, so user ID also we have. So this user ID is also we need to capture, or else we can dynamically generate the ID also. Okay, no problem. Because when you send the same user IDs, what happens is, if these user IDs is already there in the databases, then it will not create the user. So it may be getting some error. So better to create our own user IDs instead of using this Excel sheet user IDs. Okay, but if the user IDs are completely new, which are not available in the databases, then you can use the same user IDs while creating the, or while sending the post request. But if the user IDs are available, you cannot use the same user IDs. So what I will do is, even though I have read the entire data from Excel sheet, I will just try to create a user ID by using, okay. So the same user ID, we can use it, or by using Faker library also, we can create our own user ID. So first, let us see whether these user IDs are already available or not. And then if it is available, definitely our test will fail. Then later we will change this data, or else we can proceed with the same data. Okay. So here we have to create a payload. So user payload, sorry. User payload equal to new user. So we have to create a Pojo class object. User is our Pojo class, which we need to import from API payload and user. So now by using this object, we will add all this data to this payload, because this is the data we are going to send. So how to add this? So by using this object, so user payload dot set ID, we are passing the ID. So currently the ID is in the string format, but we are passing into number format, converting into number, and then we are passing it. And then username, set first name, set last name, set email, set password, set phone number. Earlier, how we have done this? By using Faker library. And if I just go to the user test, previously we have created this data by using Faker library. But this time, what we have done, we have captured the data from the data provider. Again, data provider is capture the data from the Excel sheet. So then data provider is passing the data to this post request. And here we are creating the POSO by using this data. So now we need to send a post request. Again, that is the same thing. So we can just copy paste from the user test. So how to send this post user? This is the data. This is the code. So response equal to user endpoints dot create user and log. So here log is not required because which will create so much of data. So I can simply write one assertion. Okay. So this is how we can send the post request. Now this particular test is going to read this data from the data provider. So it depends on how much data we have in Excel sheet. Let's say I have a 5 users data. So this test will repeat 5 times without using any loop or without using any looping statement. So this is how we can get the data from data provider, create the payload and sending the request. So this is a way we can create multiple users by sending multiple post requests. And every time you will get the new data in these variables. Data provider will send the new latest data in this variables. This is one test. So once it is executed multiple times, the next one, what I want to do is I want to delete the same users. Whatever users I'm creating here, I just want to delete those users. And what are all users I want to delete? Again, that information I will get it from the data provider. So we already created another data provider. This is the one, and this will give you only usernames. And whatever usernames it is giving, I'm going to delete the same users which I'm created in the first request. Okay. So now let's see how we can create another test, another data driven test, which will delete the users, whatever we created here. So let me create one more method, public void test and delete user by name. Because to delete the user, we need a name. And which data provider we have to refer here? @test, say priority equal to 2. And what is the data provider? Data provider equal to, we have given some name to this. The name of the data provider is what? User names. That we need to specify. And where it is, that also we need to specify. So data provider class. Data provider class. So where is it? Where it is? Under data providers. Data providers is my class. In this data provider method is available. So data providers dot class. So anyway, this class we already imported here. Data provider class we already imported. So we specify the data provider name and which data provider is providing the data, and from which class we are accessing the data provider method. So that we need to specify. So then we have to write this. And how many parameters this data provider method is returning? Single parameter, only username. There are multiple usernames, but every round of iteration, it will return only one username. But in case of first data driven test, for each iteration, it is returning multiple values, user ID, name, first name, last name, email, and so on. But here in every iteration, it is returning only one username. So here we have to write a delete request. So we need to pass one parameter here to store the username which is sent by your data provider, username. And now by using this username, we are going to delete the data from the database. So again, access delete request from endpoints, user endpoints dot delete user, and we can just pass the username, whatever we passing here, same passing, and then store the response in a variable, semicolon, response. Okay, now we have stored the response in a variable. Then we do some validation here. Assert equals response dot get status code. That should be equal to That's it. So now this is how we can create a data-driven test case. Same thing you can repeat for get user also, update user also you can repeat. Especially get user also you can repeat, because whatever users we are created, you can get the information of all the users. And after that, you can delete all the users by passing the name. Okay. And the same data provider also you can refer, same data provider method you can refer to get the user details. So just replacing the post request with the get request. There's only the change. You can just add that another test here. Okay. So this is how we can create data-driven test. So now how many tests we have? First one and second one. First one will create multiple users. Second one will delete the users which are created in the first request. Okay. So let's execute and see how it is going to work. So I'm just running the data-driven test. So before running this, let's close your Excel sheet and then execute. Okay, so now, so totally 2 tests are run. So because this one test and this is another test. And if I just look at the repetitions, so totally 6 methods are executed and depends on the data which we have. And if I just look at this one, you can very clearly can see here and what kind of data which is sent here every time. And these are the 3 sets of data we have. So 3 different posts which is created and also 3 different delete statements are executed. So this first delete, second and third delete. So like this, you can keep changing the data in the Excel sheet and you can test with the multiple sets of data. So this is the approach of doing data-driven tests. So API request can be different, the data can be different, but the process, you have to know more about the process, how we can perform the data-driven test. So first component is what? We need to have Excel sheet data. Second component is what? Data providers. And next one, Excel utility. And if you have these 3, you will able to do the data-driven test. So these are the most important components: Excel sheet data, utility file, and then data providers. So Excel sheets we can keep inside the test data folder. Excel utility should be part of utility under utilities package, and data providers also part of utilities. So this is how we can create your tests. Now, so if we go back to your framework, let us see what are things are pending here. So we have created endpoints for user API, and we have created user test along with the data driven, and we created user payload, and we created data providers, and Excel utility still extend report is pending. And then test data is also created, user test data. So now we will see how we can generate the report. Okay, how we can generate the report. And to generate the report, we need extend report utility class. If we have this utility class, we will able to generate the report. So now we'll see the next step, how to generate the reports. Step 7. Generate extend reports. So to generate extend report, the first thing is we need to have extend report utility. Okay, extend report utility class we read. And yeah, so only one utility we need, and testing XML file is also required. Testing XML file is also required because this utility file we will keep inside the XML file. So let's do that, how to generate the reporting. So the first step is what? We need to create utility file. We need to create extend report utility. And before that, we need to make sure in the Pomlet XML, we have a dependency or not. So extend reports dependency should be there in the Pomlet XML. Once you add this dependency, the next thing is we have to create one utility file which will generate the report. Okay. So where we have to create under utilities. Okay, so let me just show you how we can create this. So this is the one, extend report manager. Extend report manager. This is the utility class. Let me open this. So this is the complete utility class, guys. So you can just copy paste this code as it is in your projects and then use it. So this is all copied from their own documentation. Extend report, if I just go to their official documentation, so they've given so many code snippets, and whichever is suitable for our project, you can just get it from there and use it. So here we are going to use something called listener concept. In the test-ng, we have something called listeners concept. What is test-ng listener? So once you executed your test methods based on the status, we will perform some post actions. Suppose my test method may pass or may fail, or sometimes it may skip. Right? When you perform these things, once you get a result, based on the result, we will do some post actions. And report generation is one of the most important post action, because once you test methods are executed, then only we will create a external report. And we will make sure all the status should be part of your report. So to generate that, to create a post actions, we will try to create utility file which is implemented iTest listener interface. This is the predefined interface in test-ng. So these are the predefined classes: extend Spark reporter, extend reports, extend test, which are coming from extend report itself. Extend Spark reporter is responsible for the UI of your report, and extend reports is for like we can project some common data in the report, like environment information, user information, operating system, project name, module name. So some common details we can post in your report. For that we use extend reports. And extend test class is responsible for writing the tests or specifying or creating the entries in the report. Like if any test methods are got failed, we will make those entries in the report, right? So that we can specify. So here on start means this method will execute, on start method will execute only once before starting all the tests. So you can just look at here. I'm creating the report by using timestamp, because every time when you run your test cases, the new report will be generated, so that you can also maintain the history of the reports. So for that reason, I'm creating this. Okay. So this is the name of the report followed by the timestamp, and same report name I'm giving here. And this is the name of the report. This is the name of the API. And these are the common details which we can post in your report, like application name, which operating system, which username, environment, user, these details we can post in your report. And rest of them are common methods: test success, test failure, test skip. And these methods actually create an entries in the report and make them as fail, passed, or skips, whatever it is. And finally, it is flushing the report. So this is the utility file which will create extend report once your execution is completed. Okay. Yes, this is the UI. Spark reporter is responsible for look and feel of your report. So that's the reason here we can use this Spark reporter, and location of your report, and title of the report, name of the report, theme of the report. These are all related to look and feel. So we will use Spark reporter. And to specify the common information, we will use extend reports class. This is the one. And we created an object here, and then we refer them. And extend test is responsible for creating the entries of failure, passed, or skipping test cases. So here we are using this extend. What is an extend? Extend is nothing but extend test, right? So this test we are going to use here. Test object we are going to use in every test. So this is a utility file. So even if you're not understood, no problem. You can directly use this as it is in your project. Okay. So where we are going to create a reports, under reports folder. And here I mentioned the location. And dot means dot slash is always representing your current project location, and the report name which is generated here. The same report is going to generate here. This is utility file. Okay. So now to generate external report, we need to create an XML file. Only through XML file we can generate. So flush is nothing but I think there is no specific meaning for that. Even I don't know what is the meaning of flush, but what this method we're doing is once you created everything like on start, on test success, once you have done this, finally we do the flushing time. We do the flushing method. So we just call the flush method, which will make everything is ready in the report. Right? If I don't call this flush method, your report will not be generated. Okay, so that much important it is. Even though you have written all the methods, if I forgot to write this flush method, if I forgot to call this on flush method, it will not generate the report. So we have to call this flush method after finishing the whole thing. Okay, so they are suggested this in their documentation. So we have used as it is. But what exactly they are doing internally in the flush method, we are not aware of it. But without using this method, we can't generate the report. Even though if you write all other methods except this, report cannot be generated. Okay. So now this is a utility class. Let's create. Okay. So how we can generate the report? What are the steps which we need? So whenever you want to generate external report, we have to run the test cases using testng.xml file. So here we have a test, and here we have a extend report manager utility class. Now we need to integrate these two in XML file, testng XML file. And if you run this XML file, it will keep running our test cases parallelly. The test methods which are included in this will be automatically triggered. And then finally, we will able to see the report. Report generation will happen. Okay. Now let us create testng XML file. Then we will integrate this external report. So where we will create XML file inside our project. Okay, so go to the test api.test, and all these test cases should be part of XML. So I'm just right click on this package. I'm creating the XML. Testng, convert to testng. And that is an option we can use to generate XML file automatically. So this is XML code which is generated. Now where you want to create this under project itself. If you want to change the suite name and test name, you can change it. I can name it as a pet suite. And here I can say pet tests. I can change it and say finish. So now it is created new testng.xml. Open this XML file. And this is a data-driven test case. So currently I'm just disable this data. If you want, you can run it. Take some time. So I'm just disabling this for now, commenting this. So I'm going to run this user test using XML file. But where exactly we specify this? Extend report manager. So this we can add by adding a new tag, which we need to add a new tag here. So what is the tag which we need to add in the XML? Do you guys remember? So listener tags, right? So listener tag we need to add. So before test started, so here we need to add one new class called listeners, lowercase characters. Opening tag and closing tag. Right, so closing tag, and inside this we have to add one more tag called listener, and here we say class name, class hyphen name equal to API dot, and where is our extend report manager is present inside API dot utilities package, that we have to specify API dot utilities dot extend report manager. Extend report manager, and then close this tag. So this is a new entry which we need to add in the testing.xml to generate the report. That's it. So now when you run this XML file, which will run all the tests which are there in this user test, And suppose tomorrow if you add another pet state store module, other modules, so they also mention in the same XML file. Okay, so now we have done this. Let's try to execute and see whether it is generating a report or not. Right click, run as test engine suite. Okay, so now everything is executed, and now we'll see whether report is generated or not. Close everything. So to see the report, just refresh your reports folder, refresh. So here you can see the external report. So every time it will give you news timestamp. So no problem, you can still maintain the history of the report. So let's open this in the system editor. Okay, so currently 4 tests we have run, 4 test methods. So all of them are got passed. So this is post user, get user, update and delete user. And go to the graph section. And here these are the common details. We have configured these details in our external report manager. So those details will be displayed here. And here it can see, it will show you how many are got executed, passed, failed, or the things, including the timestamp, everything. If we have more number of test cases, so it will looks very attractive. So this is how we can generate the external report for our test. You can keep adding more number of tests for other modules also, you can keep on adding. So this is the base state actually. So the next thing is we have generated the reports. And what is the next thing? Let us try to add logs also. Step 8. Add logs. So how we can add logs? So here we use something called log for J2 library, and which is third-party library, which we have to use. And by using this log for J2, we will able to generate the logs. So let's see how we can generate the logs. So the first thing is we need to have log for J2.xml file. So that is a configuration file we required. So actually this is the dependency which we need to add. Log for J2 dependency. And let us cross check whether this dependency is already there or not. Go to pom.xml. So we don't have such dependency here. So we need to add the dependency. Okay. So what we need to do, we need to go to MVN repository. And you can just go and check their official website also, log for J2. Just type log for J2. And by using this library, we can generate the log files. So this is the one. So here they give a lot of documentation. So because for development, testing, web automation, everything, the same library we use. So if I just go back and see here, and we can attach the jar file to your project, or else we can add Maven dependency. Okay, so we can add a Maven dependency. So what we will do is we will directly go to Maven repository, search for log for J2. Okay, so we can say Apache log for J2. Okay, so this is the one, Apache Commons IO. This one. One second, guys. Log for J2, we have to refer. Give me a second. Okay. Right. So let's open this log for this is the old one actually. There should be some log for J2 is there. Okay. 1 second. Let me find out the right dependency here. So these are the two dependencies which we need to add. One is log for J API, log for J core. So two dependencies which we need to add. Okay, so they already given here. So this is their official website. You can just see here, Maven IV Gradle artifact. So you can just look at here. These are the two dependencies. The first dependency, this is second dependency. So these two dependencies we need to add. Copy them. Go to pom.xml and then just add those two dependencies. This is one dependency. This is another dependency. Two dependencies we require to add. Okay, so once added, so then you can just save the file. If you know what dependency is required to add, you can just search in the Maven repositories. MVN repository, there's a central repository. From there, you will get everything. Okay, so once you added this dependency, go to Maven and then update your project. Force update, I say, okay. Okay, so this is the first thing. So added all the log4j2 dependency, and then we need one configuration file. Log4j2.xml configuration. For some people will use property file also, but XML is more convenient. So let's try to use log4j2.xml file. So now we need to use log4j2.xml file. So where we have to keep this file, because all log related configurations we do in the log4j2.xml, and that should be part of SRC test resources. That should be part of SRC test resources. Okay, so let's try to add log4j2.xml inside SRC test resources. This is the file log4j2.xml. I will provide all these files, keep it with you, and you can also use in your future project. So this is log4j2 configuration file. Again, I'm not going to explain everything here. So these are the default tags. By default, it is there. So these are the log, which is having some options like appenders, rolling file, loggers. So many things are there. But here, this is the actual path where exactly you want to generate the logs. We already created one folder called logs, right? So this I'm referring here, ./logs. If you want to change the location, you can change it here. And these are all time format, all these things. So let's keep this as it is. Now, this is the second step. We need to add this configuration file into SRC test resources. Okay, so this should be part of SRC test/resources. We should not keep anywhere else. We should keep only inside SRC test resource. Second step. So now we need to write some piece of code to generate the logs. So where we can write this piece of code to generate the logs? So let's go to test which we have created. Okay, so inside the test, we can write the logs. So we can just create the logs inside the test. Okay, what we can do is in the test, we have already created one method before class, right? So if I just go back to your user test, we already created one method called before class. And when this method will execute before starting all the test methods. So what we will do is here, we will try to write some piece of code which will initiate the logs. Okay, for logs, we have to write some piece of code. And before that, what are the different classes are available to generate the logs? There is one class is there for generate the logs. The name of the class is logger. So that I can specify here. I'll say public logger. I'm just creating one variable as logger here. Import this logger from write package. So there is a package called org apache.logging.log4j. So we need to import that package. So this logger variable we have to initiate inside the setup data method. So here we don't need to call setup data actually, because this is not only for data, we do some other things also. So simply say only setup method is enough. Okay, now I'm writing the logging related configuration. So we already created the logger object. Use this logger equal to, we have a predefined class called log manager. Inside this, we have to call one method called get logger. It is same like in web automation in Selenium. So what I have done, same thing we repeat here. Log manager dot get logger, and here we have to specify. So this dot get the class. So this dot get class, because the same class name will be displayed in the log file, and this will return the logger. So I created this variable. This is simple configuration. Here we created one variable for logs, and we have initiated that variable here by using log manager. So now we can write a logs in the log file by using this logger object. So I'm taking this logger, and here I'm writing some logger. So before sending this request and getting the response, so here you can write some logger. So how to write logger.info, and whichever type of log you want to write, you can just write debug info one, whichever you want, you can just write. So logger.info. And here what we are exactly doing here, we are posting the user. So I'll write something called creating user. And I will write another log message after completion of this. Here I can say user is created. And the same log messages, you can write as many messages you want. And here I'm writing one more message. Here I'm saying what I'm doing here, I'm getting the user information. So here I'll say reading user info. And here I'm also writing user info is displayed. So beginning and ending, you can just write. Even sometimes you can also write test case IDs if you have. So those test case IDs also you can just specify here. So here you can say updating user. Okay, so here user is updated. Once the script is completed, user is updated. User is updated. Okay, so you can write as many messages you want. So that is up to you how many messages you want to write, but it's just logging some information to the log file so that where exactly did it fail, we will try to understand. So deleting user. And here user deleted. So like this, you can write all the log messages. Okay, so now let us try to execute and see whether the logs are generating or not. So from where we have to execute, now there is a dependency in the XML. So we have to execute everything from XML. So now here, I'm going to run the test once again. Yes, all authentication should be part of your endpoints, because authentication should go along with the request, right? So that should be part of the endpoints. In the last classes, we have seen where exactly we specify authentications, right? Different type of authentications. So that is same again, there is no change in that. Okay, so now we have executed. So let's see the logs are generated or not. So you can just refresh your logs folder. So if this is your log file, automation.log. So you can just see all the messages. Suppose if something is got failed, you can see here. Right. So if you want to get any debug level logs, you can change the log level. You can just go to XML. Here info is there, right? If I just put as a debug level, then you will get detailed logs. I'll making as a debug. Now you see the difference. So we got only info message earlier, right? So this time we will get some debug log also. What happened? Go to log4j.xml. So this is a debug log. Save it. Now let's try to execute one more time and see the difference. Actually, you will get so many logs. Okay, so we have done. So let's execute. Go and refresh your logs and open the file again. I think it is still not created. Something wrong. Okay. I think this should be. 1 second. I think we need to add one point here, debug point. Let me just try to add here. Okay. Still, it is not created. So there may be some issue in the configuration file. So I'll check it later. So actually, when you enable this debug mode, so if you just go to log4j.xml, if you just make it as a debug, so it will also capture the communication between your client and server. So everything will be captured. Then your log file will be very, very huge size. Along with the normal information messages, it will also capture all the debugging related messages, and which we cannot understand actually. So only the developers can understand them and try to fix the issues if there are any. So this is a approach, or this is a process of creating the log file. So with this, we have completed the development of the framework. So for the user model, okay. And same thing you can repeat for other modules like store and pet we also have, right? So same thing. So you need to add more URLs here under store module and pet module. And then we have to create more payloads also. Just we created a user model, user payload. Similarly, you can create a payload for store and pet. And we have created only user test in this class. Similarly, you can create another class where you can put all store related test and also pet related test and API.utilities. And the same utility files will be there for all kinds of tests. And data providers can be changed, depends on your requirement and depends upon your API types. And log configuration again same, logs same, reports same, everything is same. And user data, You can add data for store or pet or whatever. So the data files will be changed. So this is the base. So like foundation. And once you have done this basic stuff, and you can keep adding more number of stuffs into the same framework. Okay. And everything is not covered in the framework. Some concepts which we already discussed in the previous sessions, like schema validation, body validation. So those things also you can include here. You can write a separate test here. So here in the same test, you can write more number of classes for schema validation, body data validation, JSON path, XML path. So whatever we have discussed in the previous classes, everything we can also implement as part of the framework. There is no change in them. But these APIs is not supporting certain things, so we can do only few things. But if the API is supporting so many other things, like if you want to validate schema and all those things, chaining, all the concepts we can still apply in your framework. Okay, that is not changed. So whatever we have learned in the previous session, same thing is continued here. The only thing is we are maintaining everything in proper folder structure. That's the only difference in the framework. So authentications, chaining concept, schema validation, body data validation. So these things again will be continued in the same framework. So you can add more number of tests to cover all those things. Okay, there is no change. So schema validation also you guys can try it. Okay, schema validation, how we can try in the Postman tool, first get the response. And by taking the response, just create some schema and keep that schema under SRC test resources schema file. Then create one more class here to verify the schema. Process is same. Just go through the video once again and see how I have validated the schema. The same thing you can apply here also. Okay, so this is the base project. And with this, we have completed this part actually. So the whole thing we have completed. In the tomorrow session, I will show you how to use this property file. So instead of maintaining these roots, we will have all the URLs in the properties file, and we will get all the URLs from the properties file. So how we can use this. And apart from this, I will also show you how we can push this code into GitHub repositories, and then we will see how we can run the entire project through Jenkins. So that part we will see in the tomorrow session, and then we will finish it off. Okay, so that's all for today's session. I'm just stopping here. We will continue in the tomorrow session.